Welcome everyone to the webinar today. Really excited to host Debbie and Spencer for this very exciting topic around customer education. Looking forward to an exciting discussion. We have a lot of experience and interesting insights between two of our guests today. I would request both of them to quickly introduce themselves before we get into the meat of the discussion. So Debbie, we'll start with you. Over to you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Debbie Smith, and I am the Senior Director of Vizier University and the President at SEDMA. I've been in customer education for more years than I want to count now, and I was in it before I realized I was even in it.
Yeah,
Spencer?
wonderful.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks, Debbie. We definitely think you're the best speaker for this topic. So we're really excited to have you here today. Spencer, over to you.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Spencer Schumacher. I'm a senior solutions engineer here at Skilljar. I'm located out of Boise, Idaho, and I've been with Skilljar a little over 3 years and SaaS around 10 years, but really excited to share some of our perspective today.
Wonderful. Thank you, Spencer. So, and maybe I'll quickly introduce myself. I've been hosting similar webinars, but for those of you who has joined for the first time, I'm Sanjoe. I'm the CEO and also one of the co-founders of Talview. Talview is a online exam delivery solution with capabilities around both proctoring and exam hosting. And we have been working with a lot of customer education teams across organizations, including technology companies like many of you are from, and has been also a partner for Skilljar, closely integrated with Skilljar as a learning management system to deliver exams as a part of the credentialing programs for many of the customer education teams. Great. So we'll kick it off with the first question. Maybe Debbie, I'll start with you. You've been, as you mentioned, you've been in customer education for a few years, more than what you would like to count. But uh, how have you seen customer education evolving over the years, and especially what are those trends which are most exciting for you today from your vantage point, especially given you're not just a practitioner, but also a president of SEDMA, which is kind of one of the most prominent thought organization driving thought leadership in this space?
So I think customer education has really shifted as the world has shifted in the last decade or so. We went from sort of monolithic product training that told everyone click here, click there. Back in even in the 90s, software was really, really hard to use, but with the advent of UX and usability, software is getting easier to use. So we're spending less time on the clicks and more time on the skills that you need to use it. And CEOs around the world will tell you that people don't have the skills that they need to hire them. So what we really need to do is upskill the entire workforce, and customer education can do that by teaching people how to solve problems with your software and giving them the skills that they need to use it. So that means that instead of focusing on just where we click, we talk about use cases, we talk about best practices, and we also talk about what you have to do before you start using the software. Most of us, the software that we use, you have to do some type of pre-planning before you just jump right in and start clicking on buttons. And so teaching customers the skills that they need and what they need to do before they jump right in is a huge aspect of today's customer education that was different than the way it was 10, 20 years ago.
Wonderful. I'm sure you've also seen some interesting trends in the recent past. What are those things which have kind of stand out for you as you look at the customer education latest trends landscape today?
So some of the things that we're seeing a bigger reliance on credentials and badging. Everyone wants a badge. Since we have digital badges now, that's become really huge. Mozilla, I think, was one of the first ones to roll it out with the Mozilla badges. And now everyone wants a badge. So figuring out an entire badging strategy has become a hallmark of a mature program. I also think that we're seeing things in content development that are changing. We're reusing software. In the early 2000s, we were talking about learning objects, and learning objects were just simply a small piece of content that you could reuse. we're not using those words except for in academia anymore, but we're starting to reuse all our content. So for example, if I'm creating a video, instead of hosting it directly in my learning management system, which is SkillJar, instead of embedding the video there, I'll put it in Vimeo, because if I put it in Vimeo, I can then share it to a web page. I can put it in an email. I can put it in SkillJar. So I can get multiple uses out of one piece, which is something that we talked about years ago, but weren't actually executing on. And now everyone I talk to is talking about how they're reusing their customer education content. So I see that as a huge difference.
Wonderful. So customer education is kind of going omni-channel in the recent times. So that's very exciting. And I think, Spencer, when we look at customer education as a space, I think one of the, like any other domain, one of the crucial element which drives change in the space is the technological advancement in the domain. So from your vantage point at SkillJar, how are you seeing the assisting technologies like learning management systems and the associated ecosystem is influencing this evolution within customer education?
Yeah, great follow-up question, Sanjoe. I think this is directly tied to like the rise of the SaaS platforms. If you think about a lot of customer education teams with having the customer hub as a North Star, you really have that toolkit to deliver a different customer experience now. And specifically with the technological advances that I'm talking about, really that user experience is key. So having a community, an education, and a knowledge base, right? Again, there's a lot of different spokes of the wheel, if you will, that make up that customer hub, but having integration points now through APIs, single sign-on as the glue, federated search, deep linking. There's a lot of different ways that have allowed customer ed teams to make their experience more sticky for their customers. Some people like to learn through traditional training. Some people want to solve the question on their own, but when you can integrate that whole experience together, that makes it a lot easier for people to find value quickly. And from this, right, a lot of that strategy has shifted because of being able to stitch those systems together. Another thing that I've seen is the rise of automation and personalization in the industry, because a lot of folks know about their customers, like what products they've purchased, what region they're in, what organization are they with. They're able to personalize the training experience or the customer experience as a whole, because a lot of information about your users. And again, another technological advancement on that piece. The last one, kind of similar to what Debbie mentioned earlier, not necessarily reusing content in the sense of reusing it across omni-channel, but leveraging tools like Learn Experts to transform your existing content and make it reusable in your LMS or other areas through artificial intelligence. So content creation can be a big sticking point for a lot of companies, but if you have a tool that makes it easy for you, there's no hard cost with like someone that's an instructional designer, right? You don't have to have that background. So just to really sum it up, it's that the North Star with the community hub, personalization and automation for your users, and then AI content creation is like the big ones that I've seen as far as those shifts.
Yeah, I think Gen AI, especially the large language models, which have become significant part of the industry discourse recent times. So I'm assuming that's also impacting how SkillJar is looking at its product roadmap. Anything interesting which you could share in that regard? Is most of the focus, like you mentioned, around content creation, and in what stage is the industry with respect to actual adoption of those technologies when it comes to customer education?
Yeah, go ahead, Debbie. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so the Gen AI is really interesting, and I do use Leah, and my learning experience designers use it. And to a comment Spencer made, is traditional instructional designers tend to actually not like Gen AI. They're much more hesitant to use it, and most of the people we actually have coming in to customer education aren't traditionally trained instructional designers. So it does help create content faster. it will never fully replace our jobs unless we're creating old school product training. And people are afraid of it because of that. If you're creating old school product training that just tells you where to click, yes, Gen AI can do it absolutely for you. What Gen AI can't do is tell you what the best practices are and can't develop the use cases for you. Now, Learn Experts gets really good at giving us suggestions on when to create a demo and some scenarios that we might want to build out, but it's the beginning of building it out. So you still really need that human. And that's the thing that we really need to make sure people understand. We can use Gen AI to create multiple versions of a question. So we can create sister questions in certification. We can create different branching paths. But it's not really going to replace our job. We're always going to need the human in it, but the job of the human is going to change. It's really that problem solver, that figuring out how to do things faster and figuring out the right questions to ask and really thinking about the customer experience, which is a little bit different than the traditional product training, which we focused on product. Click here, the product can do this for you. No one cares about our products. No one does. They only care about solving their problems with our products. So that's where we can really help them. And that's where the Gen AI, we can use the product piece of it and then fill in that real customer education piece.
Got it. So if I understood correctly, Debbie, from your perspective, Gen AI is a great tool for customer education teams to really level up their game, do more, probably things which you couldn't afford to do before because of production cost or things like that. You can do it faster, better, do faster iterations, changes, and so that it's a great tool for the industry to adopt and leverage. Spencer, anything you would like to add on that?
No, I think that's spot on. I mean, the human element is always going to be the decision maker and problem solver, like Debbie mentioned. But if you have a jumping off point to create like a baseline, it's just a quicker way to get to the end result.
Wonderful. Great. So one of the, especially I think customer education is in the larger industry context, a relatively new field. And oftentimes because of that, in many conversations with customer education leaders or customer leaders in general, the return on investment gets more questioned more often than probably some of the other functions, because most technology companies, for example, when the first discussion of customer education happens, like Debbie mentioned, many of the individuals who are involved in that discussion probably do not come from traditional customer education background or instruction design background. So ROI often becomes an ongoing conversation within the organization. So Debbie, from your years of experience, what's the best way to articulate ROI in customer education, and what are those things, and how has that changed over the years?
So something that I've really learned is the importance of cross-functional collaboration and cross-functional work. And the reason that's really important when you're trying to show ROI is you have to understand what everyone else's OKRs or KPIs are. You have to understand what your support team's goals are, what your CEO's goals are, what products goals are, because customer education can affect all of them. So understanding what the actual OKRs are and then showing how you actually contribute to their OKR really helps get buy-in across the teams. So I think that that's really a crucial place to start with. And for every company, it's different. And not only that, in SaaS companies, we change so quickly that it can change every 6 months. So you need to make sure that your reporting and what you're doing is flexible enough to be able to pivot to show the OKRs. Because you could show all of them, but no one has enough time in the day to actually show every piece of ROI that we bring. So knowing what to focus on for which person is really a huge piece of customer education now.
Wonderful. And you spoke about how the expectations from the organization or the requirement itself on what ROI you need to deliver changes. Any interesting anecdotes or examples which you could share on maybe different organizations which you were part of, how the ROI focus was different?
So I had some really cool numbers, which is actually what when I really came into understanding what I was doing was customer education was honestly recently. It was 2017. And what happened is I was at a company called QuickBase. And we had the metrics, and I worked with a wonderful data analyst. And the goal there was really around churn and annual recurring revenue. And so we were able to map our data to annual return revenue. And so we showed that if people took e-learning, we had about an 11% increase in ARR within 18 months after. If they took instructor-led, we were up to about 25%. If they went through certification, and it was a true certification, so we followed the full process to develop certification, and it followed all of the process, we actually saw a 69% increase in ARR, which was really phenomenal. The other thing that we were able to show is that if a company had a certified builder at it, we had zero churn. So the certification was actually a key factor for predicting churn. So those were some pretty cool milestones to have. And it was really interesting to be able to be at a company and be able to actually show that data.
Wonderful. No, I think that has been our learnings as well as we work with customers. We've seen that a lot of times for companies, the aha moment of how much customer education can make a difference is very interesting, and oftentimes it surprises organizations on how much impact it can make. And like you mentioned, it also is a tool which can deliver multiple results. So it could be building your partner network. It could be driving expansion or retention. It could also be just improving customer satisfaction or bringing down support cost. So a lot of different metrics which you have seen being tracked successfully. So Spencer, from your vantage point as a skill jar or as a practitioner in the space, how are there any interesting long-term benefits which you have been articulating or Skilljar has been articulating for customers when they invest in customer education? Any interesting stories which you could share with us?
Yeah, more specific on like the tactical side of like how it's done. We've seen a lot more customers moving into subscription-based models or leveraging some sort of bank of funds approach to manage their education services. More on the ROI for like the revenue generation piece. Another strategy, right, is the lead generation one, which is the prospect use case. Being able to not only use your tool like Debbie mentioned for support ticket deflection, marketing, customer ed, but also the untapped resources, which are those lead, untrained people that are maybe wanting to know more about your product or the industry. And we've had one of our customers, Qualtrics, they generated quite a substantial amount in pipeline just from 1 quarter of lead generation. They had a thought leadership course that was publicly available for their users to go through. What does that mean back to the business? Well, because we're integrated with Salesforce, right? They could understand, hey, this is actually an educated or an education qualified lead, very similar to like a marketing qualified, but more from like the education space. And those sales reps could go reach out to those folks because they registered and consumed a course online. So that lead aspect is a big one. And then again, on the strategy, kind of going a little bit more tactical from the support ticket deflection side, something we incorporated into our Academy quite a while ago is our quick tips library. ClickUp does this with their click tips library. So a lot of people are using what we call in all courses or like a resource library where you can teach your customers how to fish instead of opening up a support ticket, because there are hard costs tied to a support ticket. A support person has to respond to it, spend time on it, troubleshooting. So if you can teach your customers how to fish and put that kind of change management in place, that's just another strategy that can help with kind of that return on investment. Again, you'll have to figure out ways to show back, how did the support ticket resolve the training, but just some different strategies that we've seen work over time and what some of our customers are adopting today.
Very interesting.
That's a great point, Spencer. And with everyone's launching chatbots again, right? So chatbots, they seem to have gone away a little bit. Everyone was sick of them, and now with AI, they're coming back again. So I'm seeing that. And with your chatbots, whether it's your product team or your support team doing it, if education doesn't own it, linking back to courses. So when people are searching in a chatbot, sending to the courses, to your point, can really help with that deflection.
Yeah. So, David, on that particular aspect, do you see a lot more collaboration between the customer education and customer support teams, especially when it comes to how you design the program and what new programs to launch? Anything interesting you would like to share?
So absolutely. One of the things that as a customer education leader, I've done at each of the companies I've been at is actually go into the support tickets and pull down the support tickets and actually go through and categorize them and figure out which trainings will tie to the different types of support tickets, and figuring out, making sure that the questions customers ask are actually the questions we're answering. Support tickets are a great wealth of knowledge for customer language. And that's one of the things that we all need to shift to, is more customer focused language. So if you can see what they're asking, you can actually answer the questions better for them because you're using the words that they need. So that tight relationship with support is huge, and depends on the maturity level of different companies and the maturity level of support. Some have really great tagging and classifications, and others don't. And so if I've been at a company that doesn't have great classification, I've talked to the support leader about trying to help classify questions as how do I questions, because a lot of times half of the questions from support are actually how do I that we could answer with customer education.
100%. And are there any common pitfalls which you would recommend customer education teams to avoid when designing education programs, especially with the goal of maximizing ROI? Are there specific metrics which are probably not very well aligned with customer education, or anything else which you think are probably good things to watch out for, especially for programs which are launching now or going through significant expansion motion?
So one of the exercises that we tend to love to do in customer education is we love to do a full roadmap for a year.
Okay.
And it's just really not practical, right? So we'll spend a month designing a roadmap for a year, and our products change too quickly for that. So really planning out 3 months, 6 months, having a long-term vision for where you want to get, but don't spend the time doing the real road mapping. If you spend time doing that real road mapping, then you're going to have a situation where someone's going to come to you and say, I have to have this course for, and it's usually a CEO who will come in and say, they need this specific course for something. And if you have everything so tightly roadmap and you give that CEO an answer like, I can get to that in 12 months or in 18 months, that's not going to be well received. So you have to have that flexibility to be able to move things around. So you might have to say, I can get to it in a month. We're in the middle of this, or would you like me to postpone this and do what you need first? So having that flexibility, I think, is a really important thing that I didn't quite understand when I started in customer education. And I would do these massive roadmaps. I still use a jobs to be done framework, because the jobs to be done framework, listing out all of the tasks that a customer could do, all the jobs they could do with the software, and then prioritizing who needs to know what and which are the ones that we need to do first. I think that's really latching onto the jobs to be done framework sets you up for long-term success, because you know everything that's in the product, what can be done, and what customers are trying to do. It also helps if you do the jobs to be done framework with the tasks. It sets you up for certification because you already have your job task analysis done. Jobs to be done framework, job task analysis, they really are so aligned that they're almost exactly the same thing.
Yeah, no, I think I've heard from other customers as well. JTA, or jobs to be done framework, has been great friends for many customer education teams. So great to hear that. So moving on, I think one of the key aspects of customer education programs is the credentialing or certification aspect of it. And I think oftentimes there is a lack of clarity or alignment in terms of what exactly a certification is and what's credentialing. And probably Deb, you are best positioned to answer this question, given that you're as official as it can be, being the president of SETMA. So how do you define certification, and how does it differ from credentialing, or are they the same? Yeah.
So credentials can be issued for certification or for certificates of completion. I have had the daunting task multiple times now. I've done this at 3 separate companies, of going in and finding out that they had a certification program that was not a true certification program. It was a certificate of completion program, and they misnamed it. It's extremely painful for customers and employees and sales when you have to undo that. So my word of advice to everyone is, if you're going to do a certification program and call it certification, make sure it's certification from the start, because at some point you're going to want a real certification point, and someone is going to have to go through a year of pain. So save the future self the pain, and start out with digital badging, start out with credentials. You can do badges for completion, course completions, call them skills badges or qualification badges, because when we train and we issue a badge on it, we're issuing a badge normally based on completing a quiz. But the quiz isn't something that is statistically reliable or valid. It doesn't prove knowledge. It shows that they learned what they did at the moment of learning, which is different than a certification, which actually tests your knowledge and skills at a fixed point in time. And if I take that certification exam multiple times over a period of months, I'm going to get approximately the same score if the certification is well crafted. With certificate of completion and quizzes in a course, if I take that quiz the minute I'm done versus if I take it a week later, I'm going to get very, very different scores on it often. So it's not as reliable because it's not the same, you don't get the same results over and over. That being said, when someone studies for a certification, they know that they're studying it, they're investing the time, then they become stronger champions of the company. So that's really a huge aspect of certification. You don't get that as much with the badging aspect for certificate of completion. People love certificates of completion and love badges, and they like to collect all of them. So a really mature program will have a strategy that incorporates both and figures out how they all play together. And there's some work to mapping that out. And then there's some education at the company that you're working at. But when I did this at Smartsheet, when I went from a certificate of completion to a certification, I actually had customers sending me emails thanking me, because now they knew that their certification meant something, because they could tell how much more valid it was too. So it's not just internal that really values it, customers do too. And that's when you have a real certification, it starts showing up in resumes. It starts showing up in job requirements. And that's the point, that it's really important to have a true certification program.
Got it. And typically, do you recommend that, especially if it's a new program, you start with a certificate of completion before you launch a certification program, or you can do it the other way as well? Yeah.
I've done it both ways. It depends on how quickly you want to get things out there. If you want to, like SkillJar, you can issue a certificate of completion and you can make a nice little badge and put it on the certificate of completion. So you can do that real easily. Or you can bring in a badging platform like Credly is the one that I've used. And you can do it that way. There's advantages to starting with the badges because you get the content out faster, you get people consuming it. Usually when I've done a certification program first, it's because the CEO has said, oh, we're going to have certification, and doesn't really understand the full implications of it. And then we build it out. So that tends to be a top-down decision for the certification first.
Got it. Makes sense. Spencer, from what you have seen, I believe SkillJar, being a learning management system, kind of works with customers from the very early stages of their customer education programs, and as the programs evolve and lead to certifications and certificate of completions of both those aspects. So how have you seen certification programs impacting or adding value to customer education programs? And are there any interesting, I would say, long-term benefits which you have seen customers deriving out of certification programs?
Mhm. Yeah, and this one's interesting too, because if you think of a certification program as a sequential training funnel or like a measurable event, this is where you can start to tie back, trained versus untrained accounts. And especially with a certification that holds weight and is legally defensible, which Debbie taught me, which really means like if a customer is trained and versus an untrained customer, you can really start to correlate, what is that ARR, NPS, or CSAT score mean back to the business. And, we found that it creates, stickier customers if you have a certification in place, especially if you have one power user. Let's say, there's 10 users at one company, a bunch of them leave, but you still have that one certified user. They're more likely to retrain people, be advocates of your platform, especially, customer referrals. Those are cream of the crop. And if you have certified users, the likelihood there is, being able for them to refer people into your organization. But also one of the other benefits that really resonated with me was what Debbie mentioned around job resumes. It's tough out there right now, especially with finding new jobs, and especially when people are requiring a certification with a capital C, as far as like a legally defensible cert. If it shows up on your job resume, a really great example of this is Procore. That software is used left and right in the construction management software industry, and being able to have a certification, if you move from one company to another, it's a lot easier to get a job and your foot in the door when you have a certification.
Got
Yes,
it.
and the other thing that's happening in the world around us is secondary education, college education is getting more and more expensive. And as that gets more expensive, we're also seeing on resumes and a lot of the ATS programs, when we're writing job descriptions, are actually telling us to take out the requirement, the degrees. So when you take out the requirement for the degrees, then all of the different certifications essentially become the degree that the applicant has, right? So the certifications start replacing the actual bachelor's degree. So it's
Yeah,
really
no,
interesting as we're starting to see that shift too.
yeah, I think the shift towards more skill-based economy has been underway for many years now, and I think with uh, the changing requirements, especially in the technology space where the job requirements change so often, I think it's very, very difficult to stay relevant just by having a college degree or or a larger university credential. But you need to continuously learn, and I think that's where certification programs are very beneficial for the professionals in the space.
Exactly.
Great.
Exactly.
So one of the key aspect of a certification program, Debbie, as you mentioned, is the actual exam, how you design the exam, and also how you administer the exam. And that's a
Yes.
space which is also where Talview plays in, where we work with many of our customers to help them deliver these exams in a secure, credible manner, so that you can ensure that, okay, the person who is taking the exam is the same person they are supposed to be. They are not taking any external help, and your content is also not being leaked. So when you look at, and you've done this across multiple organizations where you've built and launched certification programs very successfully. So what's your kind of preferred architecture when you look at the exam delivery and how do have the integration between all the systems which are in play at that point?
So I'm pretty particular about my customer experience. And so when my customers are taking an exam, I don't want things blocking them. I don't want things in their way. I don't even want them to know, honestly, that they've left my university. So having tech stacks that integrate so that when it's being delivered, it looks like it's in Vizier University or Smartsheet University. And then having the proctoring seamlessly integrate is really important to me. And because every company that I've been at has sold to government employees and or fintech or pharma, those people are really locked down on their computers. They can't download software. So having a software that's browser based to do the proctoring is really, really important to me. I've heard other people say, oh, they can go take it from their personal computer. I don't want my customers to have to jump to another computer. I want them to be able to use whatever computer they're using and be able to take it. So the integration of the software is really huge to me. So being able to go into your learning management system, literally click the button, the lesson, to bring up the exam, to start the proctoring, and then when it's over, immediately be able to issue that badge. It's a very seamless experience for my customers, and that's something that I look for across my tech stack all the time.
Got it. Got it. And I've heard you saying in the past about how important the the entire experience is for the test takers, and there are always trade-offs which you need to make. So probably you can enforce something like a lockdown browser, but that takes away significant part of the experience. And if even if a small percentage of your test takers run into issues because of that, because they do not have the administrative privileges to install a software, any of that, it's a much higher cost compared to probably having to create a few additional items to refresh your exams and things like that. So that I think is a very customer first perspective, which is probably very relevant because we are all in customer education. So
Well, and,
yeah, go ahead.
and the reason I use Talview for proctoring is because I don't have to do the lockdown browser, right? That is something that I personally will never do. That it's just not going to happen in a program that I run, that I'm always going to do something that is not a lockdown browser. But I'm doing training and certification for software. I'm not certifying doctors who are going to be operating on. I would have a different take if that's what I was doing, right? But we're training on software. And with record and review, we can go back through, or if we have stadium proctoring, you have proctors looking at it, but we can go back and talk to someone, take away a certification if we have to. Haven't had to do that. The only time I've really had problems with that really was internal who didn't understand the value of certification. So talking to them, we were able to have them retake it, and we've had very little cheating. But without a proctoring, within 30 days, your exam's going to be all over the place. So if you don't have proctoring, your exam's not going to be valid and reliable, because if you don't have proctoring, it's no longer fair, because some people will have the answers to the questions ahead of time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, like you mentioned, the objective is to ensure that there's a right amount of checks and balances so that there is credibility to your the certificate which is being issued, both for the professional and also from the issuer standpoint. At the same time, ensuring that that doesn't become a very cumbersome process for the test taker. So, Spencer, you've been I think you've worked with multiple ecosystem partners over the years at Skilljar from an integration standpoint. It's kind of key part of Skilljar as a product itself. We work with multiple different types of providers in the technology providers in the ecosystem. So, how do you look at the interplay between learning management systems and exam delivery or proctoring tools like Talview? What's your outlook on how these tools should work together? Any interesting insights which you could share?
Yeah. At least from my perspective, I think the customer experience is still king here, especially with remote proctoring or flexible scheduling. People have busy lives. They don't have time to drive to an on-site location to take a certification exam. So I think that really bodes well with integrating with an LMS, because the learner launches the course, they take the exam, the proctor is right there in their same experience. They finish and they earn the badge and they go away, right? That can all happen in front of your computer, versus traditionally where you have to leave, go somewhere, maybe get it mailed to you, or it comes to your email. As far as that whole loop, and that process can take weeks, where I think it's more in real time now. But those two really stood out to me the most, just because the remote proctoring, anywhere that you have an internet connection, you can jump into a course and be proctored. Even the flexible scheduling too, if you have a conflict and you want to reschedule, you can do that. And those are the two that stood out to me the most as far as enhancing the scalability. So you don't have to hire resources to do those for you on the back end.
Makes
And I
sense.
do opt for options that don't even have scheduling so that you can actually go in anytime and do it. And so that way it's just one less barrier for my customers. And I see there's a question in the panel asking what are the thoughts on live versus AI proctoring? I'm all in on AI proctoring. I don't do live proctoring anymore. I don't think it's worth the extra cost. I don't think if I look at the cost benefit analysis, I don't see enough of the benefit of the live proctoring. When you have live proctors, uh, unless you're paying for a one-on-one, they can be watching multiple people at the same time. And where people can take it at any time, they could be taking it at a time where the proctor is actually in a time zone where they would normally be sleeping. So I have heard many stories of proctors falling asleep during exams from customers. So I sort of think I don't want to pay someone to sleep. So I'd rather have AI do it and do record and review and do, spot check reviews than pay a person for it. I don't see a benefit to the live. And I know other people think differently, but that's my personal take on it, is that the AI is sufficient for our use cases.
Yeah, I think the one use case, completely agree with you. That's what we are seeing across customers as well. I think early on, the uh, recent live proctoring was introduced is because there was no AI probably at that point to do some of those checks, which we are today capable of doing. And with especially Gen AI, again, the computer vision capabilities of generative AI is at par or in some cases superior to a human, and there are obviously advantages like there are no human errors. Like you mentioned, the AI won't sleep or the AI won't get distracted, can monitor as many candidates as you can throw at the system. I think the one use case where I've seen customers still employ live proctoring is in specific areas like advanced certifications, where the creating the item itself is so difficult. Like you only have like limited set of items, and if somebody is trying to cheat, you want to kind of kill the exam then and there without having to do a spot check later, because once your item is lost, the amount of effort involved in creating the item is so much that it becomes a big hindrance. That's I think the only area where we've seen a real justified use case of live proctoring.
Yes, and there are some of the bigger companies who like live proctoring, but there are also bigger companies who have enough weight with their names in order
Yeah.
to make things more difficult and not have to worry about some of the experience as much. And they're more concerned, to your point, about the item security. And so if the item security is your primary, one of the gentlemen who I learned how to create items from, he was talking about one item on one of his exams. It took them 2 weeks, meaning 80 hours, to actually write that particular item. So if it's taking you that long to write an item, then it's a different ballgame than where, we're spending an hour or so writing it and a couple hours in editing. So that time
Yeah.
difference definitely makes a difference.
Hopefully, Gen AI can also make item creation significantly simpler and come up with new variations much faster than we could traditionally do. So, Spencer, one more question on that. So, when you look at integration generally between systems and especially other tools integrating with SkillJar, are there interesting trends which you're seeing? Are there, I would say, best practices which you've seen working well for customers? Whether it's having so would for example some of I'm sure some of the customers would want to bring their own preferred technology platforms and integrate with SkillJar, compared to there are probably pre-built integrations which you have with SkillJar. So just curious to hear how you look at how this space is evolving.
Yeah, generally when there's like that true certification program in place, they're is a vendor for the exam delivery. There also is a vendor for the proctoring too, and then obviously the LMS, just to make it more defensible, right? You can manage those exam items in a tool that's built for that system. And generally, there's three that are interplaying together. But like going back to Debbie's point earlier, the recommendation here is to have it be in the same browser experience, so people aren't going to another tab, creating another an account, then have to figure out they have to go back to the course and then launch the quiz. So the recommendation is to use tools that make it seamless. A lot of our customers use Cavion for the exam piece itself. There's a lot of proctoring tools. Talview is a great one. We have a lot of customers that use those today as well. But the recommendation there is just to make it one seamless user experience. And that's a trend that we've seen across our customers that do the true certification.
Wonderful.
I think those integrations are so important. And I've been a SkillJar customer across 6 different companies. So I know I'm one of those people who's always like, you got to integrate this one, you got to integrate this one now. And I'm always pushing for those integrations. And that what I really liked about working with SkillJar is that you've made the integrations happen for me and for my customers. Because when I look to integrate something, I'm less concerned about my experience and more concerned about the customer experience. And so like the integration with Talview and SkillJar is really sweet. And so super excited to see that one happening.
Wonderful. I think we can, if the audience have more questions, we would love to answer those questions right now. So if you have questions, please feel free to type it in. Yeah, we'll try and answer as many as we can. So while we wait for questions, Debbie and Spencer, how do you see the future of customer education evolving? So we spoke about some of the current trends, Gen AI being a key aspect, and also the pace at which the needs of the industry is evolving. So what's your future view of for the industry? What are things which you would like to see happening more in the space? What are your favorite trends in the industry itself?
I think the holy grail of certification is really around performance-based certification. So how do we truly get to performance-based certification when we give people a task to complete in the software and they actually complete it and we can see step by step. If you've ever taken a Microsoft Office certification, their platform is amazing and it is proprietary. I went to them years ago to try and get it, but they were like, nope, we're not selling that. But I think when everyone can actually create a certification the way they did for the Microsoft Office suite, that's going to be huge. And I think with AI and the integration of many of the products that we have today, I think that's coming soon. And I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
Wonderful. Spencer, what's exciting which is brewing at SkillJar? Anything which you could share in terms of key roadmap items which you can publicly discuss, or generally what's the direction from a product standpoint which you could discuss?
Yeah, I think related to the topics that we were talking about earlier around artificial intelligence and what our philosophy is on for our customers is really making the admin experience more streamlined, because we're selling an LMS at the end of the day, but the admin experience also needs to be a positive experience. Branding and theming is the user experience piece of it, but for the actual admin side, we've already created generative AI around short, long description and quiz creation, but we're going to be incorporating more things that will make it easier for admins to understand, are there recommendations in course content as far as like drop-off rates? Are there any other types of smart recommendations? But our philosophy is really to focus on the admin side of AI, recommendations on the learner side, and like showing content suggestions of folks. You have to have a really large model, and most teams, like that Debbie sits on. They're the experts of what their customers should go through. So our philosophy is that we're going to double down on the AI for the administrative side of the house, just to make the workflows easier, and their lives easier. Because most of our customer teams are 1 to 3 people on average. We do have larger teams, but we want to give back more to our customers in that regard.
Love the
Got it.
focus
Yeah, I
on
think
AI for the admins. I think that's a huge and important way to go, because looking at usage, having the AI spit out usage, and which is your number one course, and what could you do, what's different, some of that admin stuff would really be huge. So looking forward to seeing that.
Yep. No, so I think that's our internal philosophy as well at Talview. I think while AI can do a lot of tasks in like monitoring test takers and things like that, one I think relatively untapped or maybe less spoken about aspect of AI is also it can be a great assistant to users as they use all these tools. So for example, from a test taker standpoint, Talview has been investing quite heavily on how to provide real-time assistance and experience. It's not just about help, but also create experiences which otherwise probably were not possible, because generative AI has a great capability to converse and empathize with users as they go through. Exams are a stressful experience, so how do you provide contextual help and experience which makes it all the more rewarding from an experience standpoint. I think one of the audience members have requested if we could share the recording. I believe we will be able to do that. I will ensure that the recording comes to you over email. Great.
That point that you just mentioned,
yeah.
Sanjoe, on that point that you just mentioned about in product, I saw one of the best in product pieces that I've seen, and it was from Gainsight. Lila has done an amazing job. What she's taken a different point of view with, and I think this could really help with a lot of that in product, is her in product starts out with a 1 to 2 minute video on a use case to really spark that inspiration, because that's really what a lot of our customers need. And so if you can create some inspirational videos that will help them see some best practices, I think that's a huge, huge win for your customers.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think at the end of the day, the right word is inspire. If we can, in each of our respective roles, I think if we can create experiences which inspire our users, so Debbie for your customers, and for Talview and SkillJob for customer education teams and team members like you, if we can create experience which could inspire the users, I think there's nothing better than that. Wonderful. Really appreciate both of you joining us today. Great insights. I learned a lot. I'm sure our audience did too. Looking forward to more such discussions in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Yep.